I just want to share a really simple way to split up exercise selection and determine which exercise variations to use, and it really can just be boiled down into 3 separate categories. And let me just say that there's obviously other ways to think about exercise selection than what I say in this video. The 3 categories I'm about to mention in this video is a really simple framework, and it isn't ever going to steer you off course. And for each category that I'll mention, I'll provide several examples too. So the first category of exercise selection is going to be your primary variation. The primary variation is the exercise of the movement pattern that you care about the most. This is the exercise of the movement pattern that you're most likely going to track progress for most consistently over the course of your training career. For most people, this is probably just back squat, bench press, and deadlift and overhead press. It really can be whatever exercise you find most preferential. Maybe you like close grip bench press over bench press or front squat over back squat. It really doesn't matter. So category 2 is your underload variation. So this is any variation of the exercise or movement pattern that inherently reduces the load at the same relative intensity. So let's just say you have a 1 rep max of 315 for any exercise. Let's just say it's a bench press. You have a bench press max of 315. The underload variation would be a variation of that exercise in which your 1 rep max is less than 315. Ways to come up with underload variations would be changing the tempo, so elongating the time of the eccentric contraction. Let's just say you do a 5-second descent of a squat. That's going to be less than your normal back squat. You can do variations with longer ranges of motion, so deficit deadlifts, bench press with fat grips or a cambered bar. Depending on your squat depth, maybe you just do variations where you squat deeper, so you do a high bar ass-to-grass squat instead of a low bar squat. Do paused variations. You could do variations where you're pressing off pins or squatting off pins. Other underload variations of exercise would be if you change your grip or change your stance of an exercise. For example, close grip bench press versus regular bench press, snatch grip pulls versus regular grip pulls. Instead of your normal squatting or pulling stance, you just narrow or widen your feet a little bit. Now, last one I'll mention here is manipulating the distribution of work to different joints and tissues. Really easy examples of this is an RDL or a stiff leg deadlift and compared to a deadlift. These exercises have less quad involvement and more hamstring involvement. Another upper body example is a Larson press compared to a bench press, where a Larson press you have no leg drive, you have inactive legs. Your Larson press is going to use lighter loads than your normal bench press. The last category is just the opposite of an underload variation. This is an overload variation. So this is any exercise or movement pattern that increases the load at the same relative intensity. And there's really just 2 main ways to do this. The first one is just to shorten the range of motion. So this would be like an Anderson squat where you're squatting off higher pins. Block pulls or rack pulls are a good example, or even sumo deadlift is a good example. And yes, I'm aware that not everybody sumos the same amount of weight as they conventional deadlift, especially if they haven't trained sumo as much, but it's just an example. And then the last way to do this is to mechanically place the load in a more advantageous position. Really easy example of this is a Zercher squat versus a back squat or a front squat. Due to the position of the load on the Zercher squat, it's closer to your center of mass. Most people can lift more weight on the Zercher than a back squat or a front squat. I can Zercher squat about 10 more kilos than I can back squat, and I've encountered many others who have experienced this as well. Anyways, those are my 3 categories when thinking about exercise selection and which exercise variations I want to do. You have your primary movement, you have your underload variation, and your overload variation. That's all I have for the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.